Justine passed her PPR exam using my study guide. Check out her review. She got a 239, 1 point below passing on her second try. So frustrating, but she stuck with it, and we helped her get in the classroom. Hey, I'm Emma. I taught in classrooms for over 8 years. In that time, I learned a lot about pedagogy. And today, I'm going to share it with you. This video is going to prepare you for the TExES PPR, or the Pedagogy and Professional Responsibilities EC through 12 exam. And this video is going to cover 3 things: what's on the test and how to study for it, the most likely concepts you'll need to know, and we're going to look at a few practice questions. I hope we all had our breakfast this morning because we have a lot to get through. Let's dig in. Now, the PPR consists of 4 domains, which are the big areas. Each one has 2 to 4 competencies nestled under it. Okay, here's your first bit of evidence that whoever wrote this test is not a teacher. Who talks like this? Let's simplify this a bit. Much better. Let's dive into Domain 1, which is worth about 1/3 of your test score. A big concept in Domain 1 is student development theory. If you're thinking, hold up, theories? Like in science class? Don't worry, it's not that kind of theory. This just means you need to know the development of students, from littles all the way to graduation. Not only do you need to know the typical development, you need to understand the ranges of development, speed amongst students, and the impacts each domain of development has on the others. And then of course, because you are a teacher, you need to know the impacts on learning. Oh, and how to help your students progress. Okay, let's take a look at some of the stuff that's likely to come up. There are 2 styles of questions: basic understanding of student theory, and questions having you apply that to the teacher's lesson plan. There are 4 key domains to know: physical, social, cognitive, and emotional. For theory questions, you may be asked directly what stage a student is in, given a short scenario. For example, in cognitive theory, knowing Piaget's 4 stages of cognitive development is going to be key. And you'll want to know Erikson's stages of psychosocial development. And if you need to remind yourself of those stages, it's all in our study guide. You'll find a link to it in the description below. For the impacts on teaching, you'll often be given an age and asked to make the best decision. Age is key. Pick something that makes sense for that age. Like when you're dealing with teenagers, yeet the kiddie stuff at home. Anyway, young children benefit from hands-on experiential learning and cooperation. Middle school children benefit from learning more social skills. High school students benefit from support and mentorship while they make choices. Okay, let's keep going. You'll definitely get some questions asking you to pick an action, and the answer is a common best practice. And this is the best practice in the perfect world. In other words, what would you do if you had infinite time, money, and resources? Man, that'd be nice. Near the end of the video, we'll do some practice problems, and you'll know what I mean. But in general, these are going to be the sorts of answers they want you to pick. First, backward design. This means you start planning with the TEKS, then the test, then the lesson. Another best practice is proper pacing. When delivering material or changing units, remember, not too fast, not too slow. Don't forget to be interdisciplinary. This means you can weave math, reading, social studies, and science together. And don't forget to make your lessons meaningful and relevant to increase student engagement. Activate that prior knowledge. Oh, and stimulate their higher order thinking skills. I know, right? Infinite time, money, and resources. Oh, and then you'll need to assess students so you have data to adjust your instruction. Whew, that's a lot of best practices. Okay, those are the big things to know for Domain 1. Let's keep it moving by jumping into Domain 3, instruction and assessment. I know, I skipped Domain 2. We'll get back to it. 2 is worth the least on the exam, so let's do it later. I like to work smarter, not harder. Just like Domain 1, Domain 3 is worth about 1/3 of your score. So that means almost 70% of your test is about how students learn and teaching them. That makes sense. Now, Domain 3 has 4 competencies under it, and some of them are pretty thick. Let's look at one about effective communication during instruction. Oh, this competency comes up a lot. Communicate directions, explanations, and procedures effectively. Use strategies for adjusting communication to enhance student understanding. I think we could all use some adjustment in that communication to enhance our understanding. The state provides 3 examples, including, well, providing examples. But I think I can do better than that, just for you. Now I'm going to go over some specific examples you should know. But to really get the confidence you deserve to pass the test, remember, link below. Okay, so in my experience, I have identified a few key examples that are highly likely to appear as correct choices on the test. This should give you a big leg up. First up, telling students what to do. Verbal is important, but you have to follow it up and reinforce that. Use handouts, use posters. Even use nonverbal cues that remind students of a step. When I taught, I had a co-teacher who was so tired of hearing, "Miss, when is lunch?" that she had a picture of her clock set to that time next to her real clock. When they asked, she'd just point. Hey, it worked. Now, when there's a process to teach, just telling students isn't enough. A great and commonly asked about technique is modeling. This means to show them, as in, you do the steps, correctly and incorrectly. In fact, make a completed example and prominently display it somewhere. Now, honestly, I did all of these tricks in the classroom when I taught. Hey, so when is lunch?
It's after the video.
Another thing to know in Domain 3 is how to stimulate higher order thinking. Have you ever tried meditation? Higher thinking is much easier said than done. In general, any answer related to active learning is going to be a strong contender for the right choice for the question. But to make sure your students think, you'll need to keep them on their toes. Vary your instructional techniques. Use class discussions, inquiry-based lessons, and have students solve problems. Then, structure the class to promote students being engaged. Use flexible grouping to mix up who is talking to who. Pace your lessons. Don't forget to give plenty of wait time so your students can think deeply. And make sure to explore ideas from diverse perspectives. Okay, the last key of Domain 3 is knowing the types of assessment. For each type, you need to know their characteristics, when to use it, and the advantages and disadvantages. So what are the characteristics of assessments? All assessments can be informal or formal. They can also be formative or summative. So for example, you could have an informal formative assessment. You'll want to make sure you know these 4 terms and can easily identify what's being used. So what do these terms mean anyway? Let's preview an actual 240 lesson that you'll see when you subscribe.
Formative assessments are assessments for learning. They are used to guide instruction, meaning they're administered to assess students' progress toward meeting a learning objective, so teachers can adjust instruction as needed. They help teachers answer the question, what do I teach next? Summative assessments are assessments of learning. They are used to gauge instruction by determining whether or not students mastered a learning objective. Teachers use them to answer the question, what did my students learn? Meaning, what do they know now, or what are they able to do? So remember, formative assessment informs instruction toward the learning objective, while summative assessment sums up students' performance on the learning objective.
Easy, right? The other 2 are even more simple. Informal assessments are flexible, quick assessments done during class. They can be as simple as reading someone's facial expression. Formal assessments are, well, more formal. For example, you could make a quiz and grade it. And those are the big things you need to know about Domain 3. There's a lot to know packed into this exam. And while we're covering some of the key concepts here, we go over everything you need to know to pass in the 240 study guide. And we're so confident in our guides that we offer a money-back guarantee. Now remember, Domain 1 and 3 are worth almost 70% of your score. But let's briefly look at the other 2 domains. Domain 2, positive and productive classrooms. There are 2 big areas here: setting up a positive classroom and classroom management, which is a polite way of saying getting students to behave. So what's a positive classroom? Well, the ideal classroom feels like a community. It's a positive place where learners collaborate and grow together. Ultimately, it's somewhere both students and teachers want to be. Again, easier said than done. But what can you do? 1, build relationships with your students. For example, do icebreakers or have a daily question about their lives. Involve the students in building the classroom. Bland walls? Have them make posters. Oh, and make sure you always have a positive attitude. You have to believe that everyone in your room can learn and improve. Last, foster active engagement in your lessons. This means students should be naturally interested in your lessons and want to pay attention. On your test, you might be asked the best practice for a teacher to do related to the classroom setup. These are likely the right choices. Moving on to classroom management. Now, the most important thing to know here is be proactive. This means that most classroom issues can be headed off by having a few key elements. 1. That positive classroom we just discussed. Related, build a culture of high expectations. Oh, and classroom design. I'd always arrange my students' desks so that I could see or walk by them all at all times. So if someone got off task or started distracting others, all it took was a little eye contact or a quick lap past their table to redirect them quietly. Remember, we're the kind of people who work smarter, not harder. Routines are key, and not just for little kiddos. Everyone needs to know steps for things, like breaking into groups. Last, you'll want to maximize the time students are engaged and on task. Keep lessons chunked and interesting, because when kids start getting bored, that's never good. Let's put this all together for an example. You can have high expectations that students will follow a set of steps to get into groups easily and work collaboratively to create posters. Okay, those are the biggies for the positive and productive classroom. And as always, if you need help brushing up on any details here, we have you covered in our guide. All right, we saved the shortest for last, so we're almost done. Last, Domain 4. Now here's a weird fact. The test name sure makes it seem like the test is half pedagogy and half professional responsibilities, but it's not. This domain is only about 20% of your test. On the downside, this stuff is pretty boring, and the test is going to ask you perfect world answers. So even if this stuff has come up in your classroom, you probably can't answer with what you actually did. So you'll need to brush up. The big things here are effective communication and legal codes, like the IDEA. Effective communication is a biggie, particularly when running good parent-teacher conferences. Our study guide goes into a lot of detail here, but here are some key do's and don'ts. And again, parent-teacher conferences in the perfect world. You have infinite attention and time. How are you going to cater to this parent's kid to set him or her up for success? Okay, for professional development, I have 3 tips for you here. First, make sure any professional development you are picking is backed by real research. Second, pick the choice that will have the greatest impact on students, generally to help them learn better. And third, any choices about using a mentor or observing another teacher on campus tend to be the correct ones. And now for what you've all been dying to learn about. Give it up for legal codes! All right, it is boring stuff, but it will come up. Let's look at rights and responsibilities. First, the rights. Make sure you know your SPED rights, like IDEA, student rights, like the First Amendment giving them freedom of speech, and family rights, such as FERPA to protect information. Let's take a deeper look at some special education topics to know. If all these terms look like Greek to you, then you're going to want to look them up, or just use the 240 study guide. Second in legal codes, your responsibilities. A big one is the duty to report. If you suspect any abuse or neglect of your students, you must report this within 48 hours to the Texas Department of Family Protective Services, or DFPS for short. And those are the top things to know in Domain 4. Now for questions. Let's start back at the beginning with Domain 1, the one that focuses on promoting student learning. Let's take a look at a question on student development theory. Here's a question where we need to show that you understand Piaget's stages of cognitive development. We also know that a marker of the formal operation stage is the ability to think abstractly. So writing a story about how winter would be better with green snow, as listed in this choice, is a great example of the abstract thinking typically displayed by a student in the formal operations stage. All right, time for a question from the Impacts on Teaching. Since this question deals with English language learners, the biggest thing to remember is that we want to provide support that helps the students understand and break down difficult vocabulary and build their English skills. The only choice that does both of these is this choice. Using presentations with multimedia gives the ELL students visual support to understand difficult vocabulary while still building their English skills. One more question type in Domain 1, best practices. So let's take our best practice shot at a best practice question. Ooh, here's a type of question you'll see a lot. Mr. Williams is using backward design to plan the research unit. Which of the following would be the most logical first step in this planning process? Determine what technology will be available to the class during the research process. Create a list of controversial topics that students will not be allowed. Create a form that allows students to submit their first and second choice topics as a way to increase student ownership. creating a rubric for the final project that corresponds to the state standards. The key component of backwards design is knowing the end goal before students begin their work. In this case, the teacher needs to make sure that the outcome of the project allows students to show mastery of the state standards. So starting by creating a rubric that aligns to the state standards is the best choice. Domain 1, done. Let's keep it moving. On to that second most important chunk, Domain 3. Oh, a grouping question. While the teacher in this question probably has great intentions of grouping the students by ability level, which is a strategy that can be very effective, the way she chose to communicate it to her students will likely cause some of her students to be upset. This makes this choice the best answer. The students would feel that the teacher does not have very high learning expectations of all of the groups and would feel marginalized. Now, keep in mind that this is just one type of question in this competency. There are lots of ways teachers communicate in the classroom, and you can expect questions on all of them. You can see more examples if you take our free practice test, and we've included the link in the description. Instead of moving on, let's move up to higher order thinking. In this question, the student is struggling to come up with an answer. Remember that the higher order thinking competency is all about helping students reach the next level of mastery. So, giving students just enough support that they can take their understanding one step further. If the teacher chose this one and just continued to wait, the student would begin to feel embarrassed and still not have an answer to contribute. Not a great plan. If the teacher goes with this choice, the student may be able to answer the easier question, but they're not being supported to reach the next level of mastery. If the teacher asks another student, as seen in this choice, the original student may be given the answer but won't actually get to practice developing their own skills. So, this is the best answer. By providing the student with a prompt, the teacher is helping the student activate prior knowledge and then reach the correct conclusion on their own. Whew, that higher order thinking question sure took a lot of thinking on our part. Last competency in Domain 3, types of assessment. In this question, we're dealing with assessing students during the first week of school, meaning the teacher is trying to get a better understanding of her students' current understanding. By giving students the assessment in this choice, the teacher would be able to gauge which of the upcoming vocabulary words her students are already familiar with. This allows the teacher to create lesson plans perfectly matched to students' current ability levels. Ooh, bonus points! Remember when we talked about formal and informal, formative and summative assessments? How would you classify the type of assessment we just selected? Remember, we picked this choice here. This teacher-made vocabulary test, given the first week of school, is a formal, formative assessment. It's graded, so formal, and the teacher will use it to plan the instruction this year, so formative. That whole categorizing assessment types piece can be a bit confusing, but luckily, we break it all down for you in our study guides. Let's try some questions from Domain 2, positive and productive classrooms. How should Mr. Jolly create a positive classroom climate? One of the best ways to create a positive classroom is for students to feel that their teacher truly cares about them, which is best done through building relationships with each student individually. In this situation, if Mr. Jolly greets students as they enter the classroom, he is making a positive connection with each of his students before the class period even begins. I used to greet each of my students at the door every single day. 10 out of 10 would recommend. All right, now what about that classroom management piece? Remember how we talked earlier about how being proactive is the best thing you can do for classroom management? That's exactly what's happening in this example. The teacher is establishing her rules and procedures. As part of that process, the teacher is allowing the students to have an open discussion about the rules. This helps students feel a sense of responsibility and ownership in the rules, which is this choice. Since the students feel like they helped create the rules, they're much more likely to follow them. One more domain, professional roles and responsibilities. Oh, this is a good one. Questions where parents have concerns about something going on at school are pretty common. Luckily, they're all pretty much handled the same way. The first step is to always listen to the parent's concern. So right away, this choice is looking pretty good. In this case, the parent's concern is connected to something that is currently being taught in the classroom. So making sure the parents are aware is a great next step. So this choice is definitely the best answer. One more to go. Everyone's favorite, legal codes. Ooh, IDEA is a big chunk of this competency, so you'll want to know it inside and out. This question gives us a chance to see what we know. Providing extended time for tests is allowed, but reducing the number of spelling words is a modification, not an accommodation. Students are required to show mastery of written equations in math per state standards. Since this choice is changing what they are expected to learn, it is another modification, not an accommodation. But large print materials are replicas of what other students are using, so it is an accommodation. So these two choices are accommodations under IDEA, but these two are not. And that's it. We've practiced a question from every competency in the PPR. Congratulations on finishing the video. If you found it helpful, give it a like. There's still plenty more to learn. If you really want to make sure you're prepared for the PPR, take the next step and subscribe to the 240 Study Guide. It has hours of videos, so you can watch and/or listen while doing chores. It is test-aligned, so you know precisely what you need to study. And it has hundreds of practice questions, so you can be sure you're ready. And it has a money-back guarantee. So click the link below right now. Remember, work smart, not hard.